Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Younes Nouri, coastal engineer with Moffatt and Nichol, based out of our Seattle office. Thank you for having me. I acknowledge that I'm the only thing standing between you and the happy hour, so I'm going to keep it light and hopefully short. So I'm going to go over a little bit of information on hydrodynamics and sedimentation dynamics in 5 estuaries on the Pacific coast. And to put it in context, as you've heard today, when we're looking at our estuaries, which are home to a variety of habitat and really rich environments, making a change to this beautiful environment could have unintended consequences. So we want to be able to evaluate these changes and at least predict these changes. And understanding the changes in terms of physical processes starts with understanding the hydrodynamic processes and then sedimentation. And that really informs a lot of the other factors. So today we're going to start our kind of browse in Grace Harbor up in Washington, and then look at Willapa Harbor, and then mouth of Columbia River, and then come down to Coos Bay in Oregon, and then finally bring it back to Humboldt. And to put this into perspective, each of these 5 estuaries are dealing with some of the elements that are similar to Humboldt in terms of if we make a man-made change, in terms of changes to the federal navigation channel, we deepen the channel, we widen the channel, what are the potential consequences? So I'll go over some of these elements. All right, so I'm going to give you 10 seconds to basically digest the main patterns. What this time lapse is showing you is it's going and it's repeating itself, but it's going over the changes in Grace Harbor at the focus at the mouth over the last 40 years. So this is 1985 through present time. And let's look at some of the main patterns that basically jump at us. First thing, we have the migration of these sand flats landward. So as you can see, the sand flats are eroding, so the size is changing, and then they're moving this way for the most part, these two. This one is called Whitcomb sand flats. What this is resulting is this migration is damaging and suffocating very valuable shellfish beds that have existed there for the past 60 or 70 years. The second thing that we can notice here is look at these features that we call a half-moon bays. So look at these half-moon bays. There's an erosional pattern right next to the jetties. So this one is eroding. This one not as much, but then also you can, if you look closely, you can see the erosional pattern. Army Corps of Engineers has been nourishing this beach continuously over the last 20 to 30 years. Even though, despite that, we can still see the erosional pattern, and it's much more pronounced over here. So as you guys know, starting in the early 1900s and especially 1930s, we started making changes to our to our estuaries. Estuaries are homes to our major ports, and to support navigation, starting in 1930s, we started building jetties to fix the entrance and really define the entrance. Then we started dredging to build the federal navigation channel to support safe navigation in and out of our ports. And with the trends of the vessels getting bigger and bigger and more efficient, we've continuously deepened and widened the federal navigation channels. This deepening and widening in a very dynamic environment that's very vulnerable to changes has had basically impacts, and each estuary has had a different response to these set of impacts. So when we think about the sedimentation process, we have a couple of things going on. First, we need to, obviously the rivers that are draining into the estuary are bringing and delivering the sediments that's draining from the watershed. So that's the delivery into the system. Then you have the marine sediments that are coming in by the waves and currents. So that's another element. Then we do dredging in the bay. And on top of that, we have some erosional and depositional patterns. So anytime we have an issue like this, so for example here, the shellfish growers were really concerned because they were losing their growing beds. And so we need to go back to what we call a sediment budget. So we need to see what's coming in, what's going out, and then what's happening in basically in that account. And we have annual and decadal variations in our stressors, wave energy, currents and water levels, and then the sediment delivery. So those are some of the tools that we use to analyze that. So in contrast to Grace Harbor, now let's look at Willapa. Willapa is one of the largest estuaries that the entrance has not been managed. By managed, we mean constructing a jetty and then defining a federal navigation channel that you continuously dredge. So if we contrast this with the other one, this shoreline is eroding at a very high rate, and then this sand spit has been growing. And then the main river channel has been migrating all over. So very different compared to, let's say, Grace Harbor or Humboldt, where we have the jetties. This is Willapa Harbor, and from that northern shoreline that I showed you, this stretch of shoreline, 6-mile stretch of shoreline, has gained the name of Washaway Beach because it has one of the highest rates of erosion on the Pacific coast of US. And you see very innovative erosion mitigation measures by the community in the 60s. These lines are showing you kind of the historic footprint of basically the sand spits, and so quite a drastic change. Literally blocks of town fell into ocean, including a Coast Guard station and a lighthouse. Then we come to Columbia River. It is estimated that before Columbia River was dammed and Bonneville Dam was constructed, Columbia River used to deliver about 15 million tons of sediments every year. After the series of dams have been put in place, that sediment delivery has been reduced to about maybe 3 to 4 million tons. Then again, we see quite a drastic change after the construction of the jetties at the Columbia River. In some other countries with major rivers like Columbia River, they use the base drains to discharge the sediment that's built up upstream of the dam. We don't do that on Columbia River or I guess on the rivers draining to the Pacific coast. And now, before getting to Humboldt, let's look at Coos Bay. Coos Bay, the port is looking into modification of the federal navigation channel by doing deepening and widening to be able to accommodate the new basically class of container vessels. The main question there is, if you make a change to federal navigation channel, how are you changing the hydrodynamics? How are you changing the salinity exposure for all kinds of habitat? And then what are the changes to even tsunami propagation up and down the estuary? And the tools that we have these days are quite sophisticated. So if I can get this movie going, which maybe not. With this, do I need to come out of there? Or forward? Okay, cool. All right, so the animation to the left is showing our hydrodynamics model that we can use to compare the existing conditions with the proposed conditions. And then the one to the right, you know, how do I get the one to the right? The click didn't work. Went to the next slide. All right, so what you're missing out is a very drastic propagation of tsunami waves going into Coos Bay. So bringing that to Humboldt. So Humboldt is unique, has some similarities, but also has differences with the harbors that I showed you. Here, the main input to the system is the marine sediments. So in terms of the order of magnitude, more coming in from the ocean as opposed to our watershed delivering sediments. And similar to what I mentioned in terms of the tools that these days we have the hydrodynamics model and sediment transport model. that can really take care of, again, another very dramatic video showing the model we have, and we can't play. But in essence, so this is part of the work that we've been doing supporting the harbor district and in terms of development of the port, is that we have characterization of the baseline, we know the current velocities, and then if we need to dredge the areas adjacent to the Federal Navigation Channel, first, the physics tell us that if we make the channel wider and deeper, we're going to get more sediments in the areas that we dredged. Then obviously the model shows it here. So on the picture on the left, I'm showing some ebb currents, peak ebb currents, and the cooler colors are basically a reduction in velocity. And then the one to the right is showing peak flood currents. What this is showing is that if we did dredging in the areas adjacent to the port, as Adam showed and as Chris showed, we'd get reduction in flow velocity, and as a result of that, more sedimentation in the adjacent areas that we've dredged, and less sediment deposition in the Federal Navigation Channel. So kind of the main takeaway is that we have good tools these days to characterize the baseline and evaluate the changes, but nevertheless, when you make a change to such a dynamic system, we're going to see some impacts. Thank you.